Hello everyone, and welcome to Classic Gaming Today, where we take a look at the gaming experiences of the past through the eyes of the present. I'm your host Tony, and today is our second ever Shareware Showdown episode. This is Shareware Showdown Volume 2. We'll talk about exactly what that is in just a couple minutes, but first, as is usual, just a little bit of housekeeping up front. As always, I'm excited to be here. I hope all of you are as well. If you'd like to reach out, let me know how I'm doing, provide feedback, comments, suggestions, or just talk about classic games and technology in general. I would love to hear from you, and there are a few ways you can reach out. I have an X account with the handle @ClassicGamingT. I have an email address, which is classicgamingtoday@gmail.com, and we have our Discord server. The link is in the show notes. Discord is the best way to get in touch with me and the rest of the community around this podcast. We have a ton of fun out on Discord. We do weekly and monthly gaming challenges, prizes, rewards, discussions. It is all out there. I highly encourage you all to check it out. I also highly encourage you to check out our Patreon. It is patreon.com/classicgamingtoday. If you want even more Classic Gaming Today goodness, including a Patreon exclusive bi-weekly podcast expansion pack, patreon.com/classicgamingtoday is where it's at. I'd also like to give a shout out to our Pantheon patrons. They are ISO, Rich Senewal, David Morton, Sam Twardowski, Sean Oliver, and Maximus Marshall. Steve Novoselic, Wendell Jr., Chris Snowden, The Bay 101, Toucan Sam, Christopher Fose, Grayor, Snatch Bandicoot, NYC Lewis W., Martin Steiner, Melody Octavia, and Marek. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the show. Thank you all for supporting the show, whether you contribute monetarily or simply listen on a regular basis. I truly do appreciate all of the support. Before we start talking about shareware, I figured it'd be a good idea to talk about why we're having a second Shareware Showdown episode. And the simple fact is, well, because I wanted to, but I'll explain exactly what this is. So for anybody who might need a little bit of a refresher, it's probably 2-ish years ago at this point, we had a Shareware Showdown episode. And in that episode, we had pitted Duke Nukem versus Jill of the Jungle to determine which shareware title, and ultimately the full versions of those titles, which game reigned supreme. I had a lot of fun doing that. And by the way, shareware, just as a general concept, is something I have loved for my entire computer gaming career. I have such fond memories of going to computer shows and seeing a bunch of tables set up, and you walk up to these tables and you see these cardboard bins full of shareware compilation CDs or shareware compilation discs. And sometimes you didn't even know what the heck you were going to get on those discs. You just knew you were going to get a bunch of games. Now, granted, they wouldn't be full games. Most of them would be demos or limited in some capacity. The thought being behind shareware is you get this game, you play what is effectively a demo, and then if you really liked it, you would send in a registration card along with some money to whomever the developer was, and then you'd eventually get the fully registered version of the game back, and you'd be able to enjoy the entire game as much as you wanted. One of the biggest shareware releases and my introduction to shareware was the original Doom. I still remember this, and I told this story before, but I remember after my family had first gotten our really first good computer, I would say, and I mean, by today's standards, certainly not good, but in comparison to the monochrome IBM PC we had before, we had gotten a Tandy 486 SX 25 megahertz processor with 4 megabytes of RAM and I believe an 80 megabyte hard drive with an S3 Verge video card. And I thought to myself, and a color monitor, of course, with a single speed CD-ROM drive. And I thought to myself, well, I could literally do anything on this thing. It was so cool. But back then, I wasn't a computer gamer. I didn't really play on computers. I played on consoles, most prominently Nintendo consoles around that time. So I didn't really know what was waiting for me in the whole computer gaming genre, computer gaming domain, industry, whatever. I didn't know what was available then. Well, one night, my father came home and he handed me this cardboard sleeve, and written on the cardboard sleeve was Doom. And I thought to myself, well, that sounds interesting. I wonder what that is. And he said, hey, Tony, you just go ahead and play it. It's a game. And I thought, you don't have to give me, don't have to twist my arm on that one. So I sat down, I installed it, and I was exposed. That was my very first real computer game, was Doom, and the shareware version at that. And ever since that point, I have been hooked. I've been hooked on computer gaming. I loved the original Doom, and I loved the concept of shareware, where you get this bite-sized piece of an overall product. You get to try it before you buy it, and if you really like it, you can buy it and get the full version. I also love the concept of shareware compilation discs, because you never know what you're going to get on there. You might get a disc full of shovelware, in which case, but regardless, it's still fun trying things out that you don't even know what they are. Other times you might get a disc, you might find some hidden gems on there and you find a new favorite game. It was so cool finding these discs. I still remember going to a computer show one time, and there was this guy, and he had a microphone. He had a microphone like on his head. It wasn't like a handheld microphone. It was on his ear, and it was stretched out to around his mouth. And I remember this guy. And patrons will remember this story because I actually did a Patreon episode specifically about this shareware compilation. But this guy was selling something called Wacky Windows Stuff. And he just kept talking about how wacky everything was and how many cool programs you would get. And I'm standing there, and I had to be, I don't know how old I was, maybe like 13-ish or so. My memory is escaping me on that one, but I was probably around 13 or so. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I need some Wacky Windows stuff. So I did ultimately buy that disc. It was maybe like $5, $10, and you got so many different programs and games and different utilities that you could use on your computer. And I thought, this is the greatest thing. Now, when I got home and I tried to play Wacky Windows Stuff, it turns out the disc was defective, so I never was able to fulfill my wackiness back then. Luckily, I did eventually, and I guess that was maybe a year-ish ago, somewhere around there, I did eventually go back and play through a bunch of the Wacky Windows stuff. I got the disc image off of the Internet Archive. I played through it, and I actually made a Patreon episode about Wacky Windows stuff specifically. But putting that aside, I love the concept of shareware compilation discs. So I was starting to think to myself as I was planning out episodes for year 4 of the podcast. I thought to myself, well, I want to do another Shareware Showdown episode, but I don't want to do the same kind of Shareware Showdown that we did before, where we just pitted 2 games against each other that happened to have shareware releases and then declared one the winner. No, I wanted to do something that was going to rekindle some of that nostalgia from my youth. I wanted to get a random shareware compilation and then pick some random games from that compilation, play through them, and determine which ones I would have or could have potentially purchased because they were so good and interesting. And then, as I was thinking about it from the purposes of this podcast, I thought to myself, okay, so I'll get a compilation CD from Internet Archive, just a random one. I'll pick out some games. I'll play those games. I will tell you all whether I would have bought them or whether I would have not. And then the true showdown is the winner, the one that I find, the game that I find here that is what I would consider the best or the most enjoyable or the most addicting or the most interesting. That one is going to get a full-fledged episode for our very next episode. So we're going to go through a bunch of shareware titles today. I will tell you what I think of each of those, at least the bite-sized pieces of gameplay that you get with shareware. And then at the end of the episode, I will tell you which one has earned enough of my respect to actually make its way into a full-fledged episode, which will happen next week. Hopefully, this is going to be a good time. It's something that, from my perspective, it was fun for me to play through all of this sort of stuff and just try a bunch of different shareware titles. And, oh, by the way, one of the guidelines, one of the rules for this episode is every single shareware game that I choose has to be something I have never played before. So I have no bias. I have no preconceived notions about what any of these are going to be like. Some of them might be things that you know. Others might be games that are just totally random and you may have never heard of before, but that was what shareware was all about. So hopefully as we go on this journey together, you will have that same sense of discovery, that same sense of not knowing what the heck is going to happen as we dive in to our second Shareware Showdown. Our first stop in our latest deep dive into shareware starts with all of you because we did have a couple of listener comments out over in Discord. The first from Marek, who says, Oh, you want shareware? I got shareware. Scorched Earth. Not the first artillery game, but one of the best. It was Worms before Worms, and both the creator and resolver of many a dispute amongst my middle and high school friends. Rise of the Triad. Probably deserving of its own episode, but a great FPS directed by Tom Hall of id fame that really took the blood and guts to another level. Corn Cob 3D. Very interesting flight sim that played well, but is pretty tough to play now given just how rudimentary the graphics are by even the standards of a few years after it released. Also had one of the most disorienting pulse and color effects at times, where when you would get near certain items and enemies, it got pretty trippy. It also had a feature where you could bail out, walk around on foot, call in a rescue, and even remote control your plane. Pretty advanced concepts for 1992. And finally, Sky Globe. I had to look this one up to remember the name, but in middle school, I went to a summer astronomy camp. I was super popular in school, by the way, let me tell you, for a month, and we had this one in the computer lab. It wasn't a game exactly, but it was a shareware software that could simulate orbital mechanics and position of stellar objects in the galaxy. We spent an inordinate amount of time seeing how far we could stretch the simulation in time to see if we could break it, and I guess that's kind of like a game. Thank you, Marek, for your comments. Those are some interesting selections of those. Scorched Earth and Rise of the Triad, certainly I have some experience with. Corn Cob 3D I had never heard of, and Sky Globe sounds like an interesting simulation, but I admittedly have never touched that one before. Definitely sounds interesting. Thank you for contributing to today's episode. And then Jake the Brick out on Discord also said, I have fond memories of playing Scorched Earth as a kid. Scorched Earth is one of those games that you hear a lot about, especially whenever you start diving into shareware history. It's definitely one of those releases in shareware gaming that probably warrants a deeper dive discussion. I'll definitely take that down as a note as we continue to explore shareware in the future. But for today, unfortunately, Scorched Earth is not on the list of games that we're competing through today. We're going to get to that list and our first entries right now. I have a list of around 10 or 11 games that I played through. We're going to go through each one of them. I'm going to tell you what they are, who created them, and a little bit about the gameplay behind the game, and then ultimately determine whether each game was actually worth my hard-earned dollars to purchase and play. Now, unfortunately, because most of these games are 30 plus years old at least, I can't really register them today. I wish, I actually thought about going out there and going to the different spots. Some of them have different phone numbers out there for the registration. Some of them have addresses that you can send stuff to, send money to get a fully registered version. I was tempted to call some of the numbers and say, hey, I'd like to register my copy of blah, 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 pick a game, whatever it is. And just to see what the person who picked up the phone would say. I didn't have the guts. I didn't have the guts to do it. I wanted to, I really did, but I did not do that. So anyway, we're going to go through and we're just going to create more of a hypothetical situation where if I were able to register these games, the games that really did impress me are going to fall onto that list. And by the way, by the end of the episode, I will tell you how much money I would have spent if I purchased the games that I wanted to purchase. So our first game on the list is Wordle, developed and published by Solo Software at some point in the 90s, because there is no darn copyright date anywhere in this program. So Wordle, you may have heard of Wordle before, but this one is not what you think. This is not the ultra popular. Is it still ultra popular? I mean, I still play it pretty much every day, but is Wordle still a thing amongst the broader population? I don't know. But there is a very popular game called Wordle that's available now. It's on the New York Times website, and it's a word game where you have to pick, you have to find or figure out a 5-letter word, and basically you put in a word and the game will tell you whether the letter is in the right place in the word, in the wrong place in the word, or doesn't belong to the word at all. You have a certain number of guesses to actually get the right word. If you get it, awesome, you win. If you don't, you don't. That's not what this Wordle is. Wordle today is not Wordle from some point in the 90s. This version of Wordle is effectively Big Boggle, which is a board game that I absolutely love, mixed with Scrabble, which is another game that I ultimately really love to play. So if anybody hasn't played Big Boggle, the concept behind that game is you get this set of letter-based dice, and you put them in a container and you shake them up. And then whatever letters appear on the top in this grid, you have to try to make words from those letters. And they have to be on continuous spaces or diagonal. So you can only make words based on letters that are either next to each other or diagonally adjacent to each other. That is the concept behind Boggle. I love that game. And then Scrabble, of course, is a very similar kind of word game, except rather than making words from a grid of letters, you actually have letters in your, so to speak, inventory. And then you can use those letters to play words on a grid that other players are also placing their own words on. You kind of build it out almost in a crossword style kind of thing. And then you get a certain amount of points depending on which letters and spaces you've used to create your words. Some letters are worth higher values than others. As an example, the letter X will be a much more rare kind of letter in words as opposed to the letter E, as an example. So E will have a lower score total than what X would. So if you take Scrabble and that whole scoring mechanic where certain letters are more rare and therefore are worth more points, and you combine it with the grid-based gameplay of Boggle, you get Wordle by Solo Software. There are a few different modes included within the game. You also have the ability to set your own time limits within the game. I think it's like 1, 3, and 5 minute games that you could pick. There's a built-in dictionary that will validate the words that you put in. So if the game recognizes the words, you'll get some points. If it doesn't, you won't. And if you do decide to register the game, which costs $12, you will get faster load times, which honestly doesn't have any impact today because load times are nothing today. And you also gain the ability to add and delete words from the dictionary. The question is it worth it? Is Wordle worth your $12 to register for a full copy of the game? No, it's not. Wordle is pretty fun, and it's actually fairly full-featured as is, at least for a DOS-based version of Big Boggle Scrabble. The additions that you get for your $12 really don't add all that much value from my perspective, and I honestly can't see spending $12 for the minimal extras that you get. That's not to say that Wordle's a bad game. It was actually kind of fun for the amount of time that I played it. It's just that the shareware version that you get is pretty much good enough and doesn't really leave you wanting anything more. So Wordle gets a no buy from me. We're going to move on to our second game on the list, which is Shooting Gallery VGA. This one was developed and published by Nels Anderson in 1994. Have you ever gone out to a theme park like Disney World or any sort of amusement park and you see these shooting galleries that are set up on the side of different paths within those parks where you pick up a gun and it's like this infrared laser kind of thing and there's a bunch of targets set up and you have to hit the target in the right spot and you get some points, and sometimes when you shoot something it kind of flips down mechanically and then it eventually pops back up? That kind of shooting gallery experience? Well, that is exactly what Shooting Gallery VGA is. It is a very traditional shooting gallery experience that takes place over the course of 7 different rounds. Round 1 and 4 are pretty darn straightforward. There are different objects that are moving back and forth. Each object has different point totals depending on if you can shoot them or not. It's very, very similar. These are the most similar rounds to what you would see in a traditional theme park shooting gallery. Levels 2 and 5 are skeet shooting, which skeet shooting, basically there's a projectile that gets thrown up in the air and you've got to try to shoot it before it hits the ground. Rounds 3 and 6 are a quick draw styled shooting event where you're basically doing a quick draw against another opponent, a computer controlled opponent in this case. And then round 7 is an Old West styled shootout with randomly appearing bad guys and good guys. And of course you've got to shoot the bad guys and not shoot the good guys, at least if you hope to do well. This one, if you wanted to register it, would cost $15 plus an additional $2 for shipping. That will get you the latest version of the game, plus another game or two to try out, which I don't know which those 1 or 2 extra games would be. They don't tell you what they were, so no clue what they are or if they'd be of value. And you also get a full sound library to go along with the shooting gallery. So, is it worth it? Is it worth your $15 plus $2 to ship the discs out to you? Not really. I mean, the game is actually fun, but is it worth $15 given the relatively limited content and the fact that there really is limited replay value other than trying to get a better score for yourself? Nah, I'm good. Not for $15. This one gets a no buy. Now those first two are fairly traditional examples of the kinds of random games that you could get on a shareware compilation disc. Neither Wordle nor Shooting Gallery VGA are what I would think anybody would look at and say, oh yeah, I remember those games, because they were simply random. They were a function of the time. So many developers were trying to create a name for themselves by creating these bite-sized pieces of gameplay and trying to make some money doing it, which I absolutely respect. So Wordle and Shooting Gallery VGA, not really broad mainstream kinds of releases. But that doesn't mean that shareware was relegated simply to no-name efforts. No. Shareware was a big deal. There were plenty of full retail games that got their start as shareware. Like we talked about, Doom got its start with shareware. Now, of course, we're not going to talk about Doom in this episode because I've played Doom a lot and it wouldn't fit the rules of the episode. But there are other full retail games that got their start as shareware, and we're going to talk about some of them as we continue to go. And one of those is Alien Carnage, otherwise known as Halloween Harry, which was released in 1993, developed by Interactive Binary Illusions, and published by Apogee Software, who was one of the biggest publishers of shareware titles. Halloween Harry, and I'm going to call it Halloween Harry because, and this is actually something we talked about during our episode on Flight of the Amazon Queen for anybody who has been a long-time listener. Halloween Harry was originally created by John Passfield back in the early 80s for an Australian microcomputer. That game never really got a broad release, but Passfield would eventually pseudo-remake Halloween Harry and work with Apogee Software to publish it. That is the 1993 version of the game that we're talking about right now. Halloween Harry is an action platforming title very similar to Duke Nukem. You have a variety of enemies that you have to dispatch. You have a bunch of different weapons that you can use to attack those enemies. Your default is a flamethrower, which is kind of awesome, but you can also pick up missile launcher, nukes, and other types of fairly traditional action platformer weaponry. You also have one weapon that can literally clear the entire screen of any enemies that are on there, which is absolutely really cool. It is a really cool weapon to use. Of course, there's limited ammo for each of these, and the rarer the weapon or the more powerful the weapon, the less prevalent the ammo is. The full game of Halloween Harry has 4 episodes available for you to play. The shareware gives you your first episode for free, which is focused on the sewers. The only thing I'll say about that is, of course, there have to be sewers in a game. Sewers are, I think it's a contractual requirement to add sewers to almost any game that you create. Anyway, each episode of the game, whether you're talking about the shareware or the full retail release, consists of 4 levels followed by a boss level. Now, you might think that's actually a little bit quaint in comparison to many games. Look at a game like Doom where you have 8 or 9 maps per episode. Halloween Harry? Literally only 4 levels plus a boss level, and that boss level is effectively the boss fight. So you don't get a ton here. But the thing is that each of those levels is gigantic. Every single level is a maze, and your goal is to find several alien captives hidden throughout each of those levels, as well as to flip switches to open different sections of each level to progress, and eventually find an elevator to escape. That elevator is going to be located, well, somewhere within each level. And I've got to say, the maze-like levels are both a good thing and a bad thing. Let me explain. I loved the fact that the levels were truly expansive, that you never knew where you were really going, and you knew that there was going to be a ton of stuff to do throughout each individual level. At the same time, the levels could get confusing at certain times, especially because there was really very little linearity, which can be a good thing. But because each of the levels had sections that looked fairly similar, it could also create a situation where you get lost a little bit more than what you might want to. At the end of the day, I did appreciate the size of each level, and I did think that overall the gameplay and the overall feel of exploration did overcome the maze-like inconsistency and somewhat frustrating kind of gameplay that could result if you get lost and don't know where the heck you are. At the same time, there's also a pretty good number of different enemy types, all of whom are aliens, and most of them really look the part. The enemy design in this game is actually pretty darn cool. I appreciated the graphics, the smoothness of the gameplay. I also liked that some levels, being as large as they are, had one or more checkpoints that you could encounter and actually save your progress as you're playing the game. I thought that was a really nice touch. The game also offers a save system, though like many of these older shareware kinds of games, that save only keeps your progress from the perspective of what level that you've reached. It does not keep your progress in an individual level. So if you're in the middle of a level and you decide, I'm going to turn off the game and come back, I'll just save it and come back later on, well, you've just lost whatever progress that you had within that single level that you were just working through. So just keep that in mind. If you do play the game and you try to save it and think you're going to come back to exactly where you were, you will not. You'll come back to the beginning of the level that you last reached. The game itself is not terribly difficult, or at least the first episode is not terribly difficult. You have a life bar, which can be replenished by finding food in each level, or by finding alien captives and releasing them. And as you move around each level, it's not just simply walking from point A to point B, you actually jump around as well and can use a rocket pack, which is pretty fun. Though I will say the controls are definitely old school and do have a degree of floatiness with them. This is not a super duper precise action platforming experience. It is very similar to many computer platforming titles that released around the same time. If that sounds like a good time to you, the full game costs $19.95 plus $5 shipping. And I've got to say, this one is totally worth it. It is a very fun experience. You can definitely tell that this is not an amateur effort. And you can really tell that this is a retail quality experience, despite the fact that it was released as a shareware episode. This is definitely a buy for me, so this is our first one that we are going to buy as part of today's Shareware Showdown. Moving on to the next game on our list, we have 3 Point Basketball, which was developed and published by MVP Software in 1993. This game is about as simple as it comes, at least conceptually, because all it is a 3-point shooting contest, just like you would see during the NBA's All-Star Weekend. It utilizes full mouse control. Basically, all you have to do is hold your button down to power up your shot, which is your power meter. You release your left mouse button at your chosen power level, and then click the button again when the ball appears in the center of the hoop, which is kind of like an accuracy meter. It's very similar to the traditional 3-click controls from many golf games, but with holding your mouse button down as opposed to clicking 3 times. There are several different difficulty levels that are included in the game, some of which will include the basket itself moving, which I've got to say is not something you would typically see during NBA All-Star Weekend, but it is an interesting addition to the game nonetheless. The cool thing here is that the entire game is presented as though you're watching a real 3-point contest via a bracketed tournament. There are commentators that provide some sort of commentary from a fictitious sports network. All of the players are named after real players of the time, albeit as parodies of themselves. So you're not going to see Michael Jordan. You might see Air Gordon or something like that. I don't think that's the real name in the game, but you will see parodies of certain names. There's also some basketball digital sound clips that play as you shoot the ball, so it actually feels a little bit more modern. Not really modern, but at least the audio makes it feel like you're playing a game of basketball. This is a super simple concept. There is very little, or at least limited, gameplay included. You're just doing a 3-point contest. You're just trying to outscore your computer opponents. But you know what? This game is absolutely amazing. I am not kidding with you. This was a seriously really fun game. I enjoyed playing this game so much and just trying to get better at shooting the darn basketball into the hoop. It is insane the amount of time I spent simply playing this game because it was fun. And get this, it is totally free. Like, this isn't even shareware. It's just a full release for free included on the shareware compilation disc that I had gotten. Now, granted, this isn't a deep experience, but for free, how could you go wrong? If you're interested, I would definitely recommend you play this one for fun. There's really not a ton of staying power here other than a quick round here and there, but I kept going back to it. I kept going back to it simply because the game was fun. So for me, this is definitely a buy. A buy for $0, but a buy nonetheless. Moving on to the next game on our list, we have Asteroids, which was developed and published by Amazing Graphics in 1995. Not to be confused with the Asteroids that you might be familiar with from the arcades back in the early 80s. Asteroids from 1995 is a 3D first-person version of, well, Asteroids, that same game we were just talking about from the arcades back in the earlier 80s. Effectively, this game, Asteroids, is a 3D tech demo, and the graphics are admittedly pretty solid, especially for this era of gaming. You're able to move around in first-person perspective, and you can shoot asteroids to prevent them from crashing into you and depleting your shields. And then, well, that's kind of it. The shareware version is super limited. Though, if you decide to spend $16, you will get more levels, which appear to be a reskinned version of the limited shareware level, as well as an additional game that is simply described as, and I quote, a cool tank game called Modem 3D, which can, interestingly, be played with a friend via your Haze-compatible modem, according to the game's documentation. It looks like a spiced-up version of Battlezone with color graphics, which honestly sounds kind of cool, but who knows how that game actually plays. So, would I spend $16 to get Asteroids and I quote, a cool tank game? No. No, hard pass here. There is just not enough here, especially for $16. Honestly, as I sat down and I was playing it, I didn't want to keep playing the shareware level, let alone more levels in the game. This one is absolutely a no-buy for me. Moving on to our next game, and staying with the space theme, we have Astrofire, which was released in 1994, developed and published by ORT, O-R-T Software. This one is another Asteroids clone. It's actually, though, a more traditional two-dimensional tops-down perspective Asteroids clone, albeit with enemies thrown in for good measure. There are 3 episodes included in the full version of the game, and that first episode is available for shareware use. I've got to say, this is a fine little Asteroids clone. There are enemies that you can fight, there are power-ups to pick up, and there are way flashier graphics than what you would see in the arcade original game. This is kind of fun, and as I was sitting there playing the game, I thought to myself, this is not a bad Asteroids clone, and I appreciated some of the more modern, so to speak, touches that were included in the game. So I was really curious how much the full version would cost, and it turns out the full version of Astrofire costs $29.95, which I will say, no freaking way. This is not a bad game, but the dev team must have been smoking something really powerful to think they'd be able to get $29.95 for this. Hard pass, simply because the amount that they're trying to charge is way too much for the game that you're going to get. This one is definitely a no-buy. Moving on to our next game, we have Cannon Fodder, released in 1993, developed by Sensible Software, and published by Virgin Interactive. This one is a squad-based real-time tactical action game. And interestingly, I have to relay a little bit of perspective on this one. When I saw Cannon Fodder on this list of shareware titles, and I saw it was created by Sensible Software, there was a memory. There was something that jogged in my brain, and I thought to myself, wait a second, I recognize this name. I recognize Cannon Fodder. I recognize Sensible Software. We actually talked a little bit about Sensible Software on a prior episode of the podcast. I just couldn't place it, and I was thinking to myself, wait a second, were they a big deal? Was this a big deal kind of release? So I will admit, I took a little look and was just curious, is this a big deal? And it turns out, yeah, this was kind of a big deal. And the reason I remembered it is because Sensible Software was one of the most prominent Amiga developers out there in the early 90s. And Cannon Fodder is widely regarded as an amazing game that people just have to play. It was almost like one of those Amiga titles that everybody loved. I had never played it because, as I think most people know, I have a pretty big blind spot when it comes to Amiga-centric gaming. So when I started to play Cannon Fodder, and by the way, this is the DOS shareware version of the title, I didn't know what to expect, but I was kind of excited to get engaged here because I had never played it, and apparently it's a pretty well-known game, even though I myself didn't really know anything about it. So, the way Cannon Fodder is set up is you need to navigate a number of different missions. Now, those missions can be split apart into any number of phases, between one and several phases. I think in the shareware version, I want to say the biggest mission might have been 3 or 4 phases, and each of those phases have different objectives. You might have to defeat all of the enemies in a given map, or you might have to destroy all enemy buildings, or you might have to save civilians. Those kind of objectives. Very simple objectives, but ones that really do support a degree of gameplay that feels kind of good to play. There are fairly smooth graphics here. The gameplay is simple, which all you have to do is left click to move, right click to shoot, and if you hit the left and right mouse buttons together at the same time, you will throw a grenade or fire a bazooka depending on which secondary weapon you have equipped. Your machine gun's ammunition is unlimited, but grenades and bazooka missiles are restricted. You do not have unlimited grenades or bazooka missiles. And sometimes when you start a mission, you don't even have enough ammo at the beginning of the mission to be successful. There are some missions where you have to acquire additional ammo actually in the mission itself. You might find crates that have grenades in them or crates that have bazooka missiles in them, and you have to pick those up in order to achieve your objectives. This can be a bit tense as you're playing the game, especially because many stages have enemies that continue to move at you and try to take you down, and as you're shooting at them, you have to make sure you do not shoot the ammo crates near them because the ammo crates are explosive and a stray bullet will destroy those crates. This appears to be a pretty cool game, and as I started playing the game, I thought to myself, this is pretty darn cool. Though I will say it appears to be brutally difficult. Not every mission. Some missions really aren't bad. Others, though, are absolutely ridiculous. And some missions actually give you the ability to control vehicles like tanks, helicopters, ski-doos, and jeeps, which conceptually sounds awesome. The vehicle controls, though, take a lot to get used to. I cannot count how many times I crashed my ski-doo into the tree line just trying to jump over a ramp to get to the next part of a stage. This was something that really, really got frustrating. I was so frustrated with this game. It got so challenging. Some levels almost appeared impossible. But for some reason, I kept coming back. I don't know why. There was something here. There is something addictive about this game. And after I finished the shareware, which contains 20-ish levels out of the 72 that are included with the full version, I stepped away and I thought to myself, well, geez, I kind of want more Cannon Fodder. I was so pissed off at the game many times. I was frustrated, but I really wanted to play more. And it kind of got its hooks into me. And I'm even thinking about it now, so frustrating. Some of the missions are just unfair. I'm okay. I gotta calm down because Cannon Fodder really got under my skin, but I kind of want to play more right now. What is going on with why? Why is this happening? Well, $34. $34 would get me the full version of the game. Is it worth it? Yeah. Yeah, I have to. This is a strangely compelling game. I don't know why I want to torture myself more, but the torture felt so darn good. What is wrong with me? Anyway, Cannon Fodder is definitely a buy for $34. Moving on to our next game, we have Dark Wolf, which was released in 1994 and developed by D&D Software. This one is a side-scrolling platformer, but also contains some light RPG elements, most prominently the fact that you can gain levels, sort of, and acquire a variety of spells that you can use as you play the game, like the Feather ability, which makes it so that you're light as a feather, and a shield, which makes it so that you take less damage, and jump, which makes it so that you can jump really high. The feather, by the way, just to be a little bit less tongue-in-cheek, the feather makes it so that you fall to the ground a little bit slower, just like a feather would if it's falling in the sky. Anyway, you can also collect a number of different items in the game, like a fire wand, which will become your primary way of dealing damage, as well as health and magic restoration gems. And in one instance, you do have to find a key, which opens the final door in the shareware version of the game. All of the items that you can pick up have a limited number of uses, though because the fire wand is pretty much the only offensive move that you have in the shareware, the ammo for that one is fairly plentiful. The concept behind Dark Wolf is interesting, and the side-scrolling platforming action feels like it was attempting to capture the feel of other computer-based side-scrolling action platformers, like Commander Keen, Duke Nukem, and Jill of the Jungle. And actually, now that I think about it, it feels like Jill of the Jungle was perhaps a heavy influence on this one, just given the overall style of the game. I can tell, and if you try to play this game, you'll be able to tell very clearly that this was an attempt at making a worthwhile game. But it was just a bit too amateur for my tastes. The controls were finicky, the enemies were uninspired and cumbersome to deal with, and the platforming was floaty and imprecise. Dark Wolf tried to look the part of a quality action platformer, but it failed to capture the feel of other quality titles. The shareware version gets you 3 fairly long levels to play through, while you can pay $16.95 for the full version of the game, which brings the total level count up to around 8 and adds additional spells, enemies, and opportunities for character advancement. To this one, I say thanks, but no thanks. This one is a no buy for me. Moving on to our next game on the list, we have Boppin'. Developed in 1991 by Accursed Toys and published by Apogee Software, that shareware publishing company that is so well known. Apogee, I truly do love you. Anyway, Boppin' is a puzzle game, similar in some ways to the match 3 symbols kind of games that you find everywhere on mobile device online stores today. But with Boppin', things are actually a bit deeper than those mobile experiences that you might have seen today. With Boppin', you get the first episode of the game as shareware, while the full version has 5 episodes for $19.95, with a quote-unquote super version also being available that contains even more levels than the standard full version of the game. The question is it worth it to buy any of those extra levels or expansions on the shareware version? Well, I gotta say, playing through Boppin', I had a really good time. Each level was incredibly unique, and each match 3 kind of symbol set was different and themed based on the stage that you were playing in. As an example, in one level you might need to match sushi pieces, while in another you may need to match similarly colored gems. I loved the fact that each level was unique, and that even expanded to include not just the level overall graphics, but also the graphics of the match 3 objects that you were trying to match up. I thought that was a really nice touch. I really enjoyed playing Boppin'. Now the trick here with this game is in positioning your character, and then selecting the appropriate angle to throw those various symbols at in order to make sure you collide with a matching object. If you hit matching objects, you'll clear that area from that object, so that object will disappear and the screen will become just a little bit clearer. If, however, you miss, your object will collide with any number of things. If it hits the wall, it'll bounce off the wall in the angle that you threw it. If it hits a ceiling, it will once again use physics to determine how it's going to bounce off that ceiling. If it hits a non-matching symbol, well, you really don't want that to happen because that will cost you a life. Unlike some Match 3 games, you can actually move around the level with your character, both side to side as well as by using elevators to access different sections of different stages, making this a little bit more of a puzzle platforming kind of experience as opposed to a pure puzzle game with a stationary spot that all of your objects get fired off from. Though admittedly, the platforming action isn't really too deep here. I mean, all you can do is move and throw. You can't even jump. So while it does add a certain dimension to the overall gameplay, at the end of the day, it's not really a full-fledged platforming kind of experience. This limited platforming and judging the angles of your throws does take some getting used to. But after a few levels, you will get the hang of it, and then you will slowly become addicted. The game isn't hard, but it also isn't easy. And it's a good thing the game offers a save feature to preserve your progress, because if you lose all of your lives, it is game over, and you have to start from the very beginning of the game. After you become proficient with the game, you'll end up finding a really fun and incredibly well-made puzzle experience. And in fact, the whole episode was pretty much perfect, until the final boss fight. Now, you might be thinking, wait a second, there's a boss fight in a puzzle game? Yep, there is a boss fight in a puzzle game, and let me tell you, I am not a fan. It's not that the boss was mechanically difficult. All he did was move around the screen at various angles, occasionally choosing to drop straight down to try to crush you, which conceptually is a simple enough boss fight. The issue is that the game's controls and mechanics were really focused on puzzle solving and not boss fighting. Let me put it into perspective. It took me a couple hours just to get past this one fight. A couple of hours. Let that sink in for a second. This fight was so wrong on so many levels. For one, having a boss fight in a puzzle game feels like a sin just in general. And two, the boss had a ridiculous number of hit points. I'm not even joking. You had to hit the boss at least 100 times to defeat it. And let me tell you, the object throwing mechanics in the game are not all that fast. The boss literally passes through around 10 different phases of damage, which just felt too much to me. It truly did mar the quality puzzle experience I had just had for over 20 levels, and I was not happy when I encountered this boss. This really irritated me. That being said, the puzzle elements of Boppin' were definitely good enough to warrant a purchase from me. If you remove the boss fight, this is one seriously awesome puzzle game. So yes, we will buy Boppin', and you know what? We're going to buy the Super Ultra Deluxe version for $29.95 because I want some more of this puzzle platforming action. We're going to move on to our next game on the list, which is Hocus Pocus, developed in 1994 by Moonlight Software and published, once again, by Apogee Software. This was another side-scrolling action platformer game. And after Commander Keen, I mean, the fact is, this was a pretty popular style of game for home computers, though obviously not all were equally high quality. It's kind of the way most things happen, where you get a genre-defining game, in this case on the computer. From a side-scrolling platforming perspective, Commander Keen was really the one that put it on the map. It proved it could be done, it proved side-scrolling on computers could be done, and it could be done well. So after Commander Keen came out, everybody wanted to create a side-scrolling platforming action kind of game. There were so many of these games, and like I mentioned, not all of them were of the same level of quality. The good news is that Hocus Pocus screams quality. The core concept behind the game is that you need to collect a number of gems scattered about each level to progress to the next level. There are 9 levels in the Shareware episode that you can play for free, while there are 4 total episodes of 9 levels each in the full release of the game. As you navigate through a given level, you're going to be able to collect treasures to attempt for a high score, as well as defeat a number of different enemies, none of which are all that mechanically challenging, but you do have to fight pretty large groups of bad guys, which can pose a challenge. Luckily, there are some power-ups you can pick up, most of which increase the rate of fire for your main weapon, which is a magical bolt you fire from your fingers. One of those power-ups, by the way, turns your weapon into a machine gun of magic firing, which does absolutely ridiculous damage, and I gotta say, I'm in love. I loved moving around and shooting basically machine gun lightning bolts from my finger. I don't know why, but it felt really good when I had that power up. But putting that aside, as you continue to explore the game, you'll find a variety of secrets. You'll speak to a wizard who might give you hints or occasionally question if you have the skills necessary to progress through the rest of the game. And you'll also discover tons of hidden nooks and crannies in each level that may be hiding one of the gems you might need to complete a given level, because you do need to collect a number of gems in each level in order to progress to the next level. And it's actually a pretty straightforward kind of experience. Let's say you need to find 8 gems in a level. You find the 8th gem. As soon as you touch it, you will warp out of that level into the next level. Playing Hocus Pocus, it is very clear, and it becomes clear super early just how good this game is, especially in comparison to some of the poorer platformers that I had played during my latest Shareware deep dive. The graphics here are unique, well-designed, and diverse. The music matches the action on the screen really well. The controls are mostly tight, at least as tight as you can expect from this era of PC platform gaming, and the level design is impressive, with each stage encouraging exploration, which of course you need to do if you actually want to progress from one level to the next. This one intrigued me, and I enjoyed myself throughout the entire experience. You can buy the full game for just $24.95 plus $5 shipping, and I have to say, yes, this is a definite buy for me. We're going to move on to our next game on the list, and actually this is the final game on our list today. It is a game called Gamma Wing, released in 1991, developed by Rockland Software Productions, and published by Gold Medallion Software. This one is an attempt, and I do say attempt, at a Wing Commander mixed with TIE Fighter kind of space combat experience, complete with RPG elements like player advancement, ship upgrades, skill assignment, and a full space combat engine with tons of keyboard hotkeys to learn, joystick support, and an overarching narrative that provides context to the game's campaign, which sees you attempting to capture enemy planets and star systems and populate them with friendly civilizations. If you read that description on the back of a box, and you saw screenshots from a game that admittedly has early 90s graphics, but it looked like Star Wars TIE Fighter, or it looked like Wing Commander, I would venture a guess that you would buy that game on the spot, because it sounds absolutely awesome. It looks, if it's not moving, awesome. And keep that in mind. As long as it's a screenshot, it actually looks kind of cool. Well, unfortunately, this one fails in every single capacity. It had all of the makings of a really good game. Beyond the RPG and deep combat elements I already mentioned, Gamma Wing also attempts to create a space hangar hangout kind of location between missions, and there are even mini-game diversions included that you can play if you so choose to. There was definite thought about the kinds of features that space combat gamers would appreciate, and I really think there was a lot of effort put into this title. The execution, however, is totally broken. The controls are super sluggish. The combat mechanics are almost indecipherable, with no impact to any time you either get hit or hit enemies with your ship's weaponry. The user interface looks amateur and fails to provide usable information to would-be space pilots. It's just bad, especially in comparison to standards of the genre. This one, for me, was effectively unplayable. And when I say unplayable, I mean I literally couldn't figure out what the game was doing. I tried. I really did. I tried different settings. I tried different CPU cycles for DOSBox, thinking that maybe I had set it up wrong. I tried changing my controls. I almost went and got my joystick just to see if I could do something with it. I looked online to see if anybody was talking about Gamma Wing and would give me some information about how to get this thing to be an actual worthwhile game. And it turns out it just isn't. It wasn't. This one, it missed the mark entirely. Now, with the shareware release, you do get episode 1, and there are 2 more episodes available if you decide to throw away and burn a $20 bill for the registered version. I beg you, though, do not buy this game. Don't even look the game up. Don't even try to watch the game on YouTube, because you will need to bleach your eyes. It is totally not worth it. I'm sorry for being so negative about this one, but I had such high hopes. You know how when you have high hopes for something, you think to yourself, wait a second, is this going to be the marriage of TIE Fighter and Wing Commander? That sounds freaking awesome. I want to play that game. Well, no, you don't want to play this game. Please don't. I'm begging you. Do not try. It is atrocious. This is definitely a no buy from me. So anyway, that was our list. That was our Shareware Showdown. We went through 11 games, and of those 11 games, 5 met the mark. 5 of them were games that I could see myself playing more and actually wanted to play more to learn more about them, to experience more of their gameplay. Those 5 games were Alien Carnage or Halloween Harry, depending on which version of the game you buy. 3 Point Basketball, which was, once again, that throwaway shareware game that was just there for free, but ended up being super fun. Cannon Fodder by Sensible Software. Boppin', the puzzle game with a boss fight that I cannot understand why anybody would put. I really don't. It's like adventure games. We've talked about this before. You know how in adventure games, there are some companies that decide to throw in things that are just not really part of traditional point-and-click adventure game gameplay? LucasArts did this a lot. I mean, look at Full Throttle with some of their minigame kind of things, especially the Destruction Derby thing near the end of the game. It just doesn't add much to what you would want. There's some games that add action elements in it. Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. First of all, I love Full Throttle. I love Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. The fighting in Fate of Atlantis, I mean, I get why they added it, but why did they add it? You know what I mean? Like, it's just not an adventure game thing. It just didn't, I don't know. I'm going off on a tangent, but anyway, Boppin' you should not have a boss fight in a puzzle game. I am declaring that now. That is a rule. It is a rule moving forward. Do not put boss fights in puzzle games. It just doesn't work. And then finally, Hocus Pocus was the final game on our list. So 5 out of the 11 games we looked at warrant a buy. That means that if we were to buy every single one of those games, we would have spent $118.85. And I gotta say, just thinking back on these 5 games, and granted, that's really only for 4 games at the end of the day, because like I mentioned, 3 Point Basketball is free. But looking at these 5 games, there's something good about each of them. I do have to say that 3 Point Basketball, that's not going to win it. That is not going to win the competition. The main reason for that is it's just not deep enough. There's not enough gameplay. I feel like I already experienced everything that there is to experience with that game. So why would I play it more? Why would I try to do... I couldn't possibly do a full episode on 3 Point Basketball, because everything that I just talked through, that was the episode. It would have been a 5-minute episode. It would have been a real easy week for me, a real not engaging week for everybody else. But I do appreciate what they did with that game. So let's talk through some of these. Let's just talk through them. Alien Carnage or Halloween Harry. So it's solid 2D platformer action kind of experience. There's definitely some depth there, different weapons to play around with. I did like the action. I liked the exploration, though the maze levels, could get a little bit murky, I guess, but really not a bad game. Cannon Fodder. Cannon Fodder was so damn frustrating. I got so irritated playing that game. Why do I want to play it more? I don't know. There is something addictive in that game. I can't put my finger on it, but I feel like I want to find out what it is, and I want to experience more. Man, I'm torn. I am torn on Cannon Fodder. And then Boppin'. Boppin's great. I mean, there's really the only thing I didn't like about Boppin' was the boss fight. If you take that out, the puzzle experience was incredibly fun and engaging. And then Hocus Pocus, it's quality. I mean, it is quality, but if I'm thinking between Hocus Pocus and Alien Carnage, if I'm going to pick a side-scrolling action platforming title, I think I got to go with Alien Carnage / Halloween Harry over Hocus Pocus. It's not that Hocus Pocus is bad. It's just Hocus Pocus is not as good, or it doesn't feel as refined as Halloween Harry. Okay, so let's do this again. So we have Halloween Harry, we have Cannon Fodder, we have Boppin'. The question is, what do I want to play? Well, Halloween Harry, I kind of have done a bunch of platforming kind of titles, not a bunch of computer ones. So I did play the entire Commander Keen series a few years ago. I did play Duke Nukem. I played Jill of the Jungle. Did I do any others? Did I do any other computer platforming action kind of games for the podcast? I don't think I have. I might be forgetting, but I don't think I have. So, okay. So we haven't covered too many of those. Cannon Fodder? It's kind of a very different kind of experience. Not really a real-time strategy game, though it is kind of a real-time strategy game. It's kind of like a twin-stick shooter without the twin sticks. It's very unique. It's a very unique kind of experience. And then finally, Boppin' is a puzzle game. We've done a couple. Have we? Yeah, we've done a couple of puzzle games before, but I don't know. Would the match 3 gameplay over a ridiculous number of levels, would that start to get old? Maybe. I like Boppin' a lot. I do wonder what kind of bosses they might have for different episodes. I got to eliminate Boppin'. Boppin's out of the list. I don't think I'm going to do that one. So we're down to 2. We're down to Halloween Harry and Cannon Fodder. Oh man, this is a tough one. This is a tough decision. Cannon Fodder really frustrated me. Like, I wanted to punch things. Could I actually get through 72 levels of that without going crazy? Oh, Halloween Harry was easy though. Halloween Harry also didn't have that many levels. It was like 4 levels per episode in a boss fight. So 20 levels total. I could probably knock that out in a couple hours. That's a bonus. I could do more talking as opposed to just playing, but is it really that deep? Cannon Fodder, I feel like it would take me forever. Some of the missions are ridiculous. Oh, what do I want to do? This is a tough decision. All right. I know what I'm going to pick. The winner of our second ever Shareware Showdown, and the game that will have a full episode dedicated to it next week, is Cannon Fodder. I've got to play this one. I want to play more of it, even though it was very frustrating. I'm very curious. I am so curious. I'm a little scared, but I'm so curious what the full game is going to be like. But I do have, so this is appealing to me from a couple of different perspectives. One, I really want to play more Cannon Fodder. There is something addicting in that game that I want more of it. But then secondly, I know the original version was on the Amiga. So I think what I'll do for next episode is I will play the Amiga version of Cannon Fodder, because that kills 2 birds with 1 stone. Not only do I get into my Cannon Fodder addiction and satisfy that, but also I get to play an Amiga game, which, like I've mentioned several times before, is a personal gaming blind spot. So ultimately, I'm excited to learn more about Cannon Fodder and play it more in preparation for next week's episode. Putting that aside, though, and putting the whole concept of a Shareware Showdown off to the side, Shareware itself represented a unique time in computer gaming, and in many ways was a predecessor to the independent developer scene that remains prevalent even today. While I'm not sure if anything will ever truly capture the feeling of getting a brand new Shareware compilation and not knowing what the heck you're going to discover on that disc, the simple fact is that Shareware, like many aspects of computer and video game history, still deserves to be remembered, and I personally can't wait to continue exploring these innovative and often bite-sized slices of gaming in the future. That was our latest Shareware Showdown. I hope you all enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you'd like to reach out, let me know how I'm doing, provide feedback, comments, suggestions, or just talk about classic games and technology in general, I would love to hear from you, and there are a few ways you can reach out. I have an X account with the handle @ClassicGamingT. I have an email address, which is classicgamingtoday@gmail.com, and we have our Discord server. The link is in the show notes. Discord is the best way to get in touch with me and the rest of the community around this podcast. We have a ton of fun out on Discord. I highly encourage you all to check it out. I also highly encourage you to check out our Patreon. It's patreon.com/ClassicGamingToday. If you want even more Classic Gaming Today goodness, including a Patreon exclusive bi-weekly podcast, expansion pack, patreon.com/ClassicGamingToday is where it's at. Before we sign off for the week, I do want to mention that our next episode is going to be focused on our Shareware Showdown winner, Cannon Fodder. So definitely write in if you have any particularly fond or not so fond memories of that experience, and to get your comments featured on the show. At the same time, I recognize you're likely listening to this podcast on any number of podcast services, and if you would feel so inclined, it would be great if you could leave me a review. This is not about trying to bolster star counts. This is not about trying to harvest a ton of 5-star ratings. So if that happens, awesome, it means we're doing something right. No, what it's really all about is trying to deliver the best possible podcast I can. The only way to do that is to get feedback from all of you, the listener community, to make sure I'm hitting the mark and delivering the content you all want to listen to. We get new listeners every single day, which is simply amazing. I want to continue to grow this community and continue to make the best possible podcast I can. We'll be back in around a week with our next episode focused on cannon fodder. Until then, remember, sometimes the games of the past are just as good, if not better, than the games of today. Goodbye, everyone.